I guess it's cool these days to say that Thanos was right and Magneto was always right. If you look at the history of the characters, whatever, that is not correct. And really, one of the big downfalls of the Krakoan era is that they forgot to differentiate between the good guys and the bad guys. And that's kind of why we have X-Men in the state that it is right now, Doc.
Yeah, I mean, look, when you open everything up into a hippie love fest and you include the bad guys in it, you can't have a story, like especially a superhero morality tale story, when there's no bad guys to fight. And that's kind of the problem. Mutants fighting humans and bigots all the time, it runs out of its effectiveness really, really quick. The great thing about the X-Men was that it was mutants often fighting other mutants that were undermining the goals of Xavier, because the goals of Xavier were the peaceful coexistence.
And in a moment of shocking clarity, there was actually an article, I think it's on CBR, talking about why Magneto was never right, and really lays out a pretty good case for it. I thought we would talk about some of these examples, and I definitely encourage people to go check this one out because it's an article worth reading. It starts out, Magneto was always postured himself as a mutant savior, the one true path to a mutant utopia. However, his actions over the years have proven time and time again that, despite his best intentions, Magneto has never been right in his crusade against humanity. Not only has Magneto proven himself to be a tyrannical mass murderer, but he is also a hypocrite of the highest order, his hands wet with as much mutant blood as human. And I think that lays it out pretty good with what's wrong with Magneto. Are his intentions or what he would like to be the end goal pretty good? You know, is that what we should want? Probably. It's always the way he goes about it, and the fact that he always ends up murdering people.
Magneto's fatal flaw is that he becomes the thing that he hated. He becomes a cautionary tale. I feel like a lot of X-writers, especially in the last 20 years or so, have forgotten that. I mean, it goes back to the Grant Morrison era of X-Men and Quentin Quire sitting in the classroom after he's undergone his little bit of a transformation from knockoff Peter Parker into transgressive outsider bad boy Quentin Quire, and him wearing that Magneto is right t-shirt. I feel like a lot of people and a lot of X-writers in the past few years have taken the wrong message from that story arc and the plot progression. And, you know, that honestly, that fucking t-shirt. The whole point is he was being an edgy teenager that was wrong and that thought he knew better than everybody else.
Next up, they talk a little bit about the relationship between Professor X and Magneto. Magneto's relationship with the X-Men has always been one of violent opposition due to his utter inability to see the world through their and Xavier's eyes. Magneto did not simply believe that they are wrong. He believes them to be weak and misguided, absolute fools who are no better than the human cattle they fight to protect. The poetic tragedy of Magneto and his rivalry with the X-Men is that he and Xavier had once been the closest of friends, but as Magneto's violent inability to back down from radical extremism grew, his friendship with Xavier eroded.
They're essentially two paths to the same end goal, and they often disagreed on the means to that end. Xavier's means were much more principled. Magneto's were far more ends justifying the means. And that puts them into conflict. Now, I mean, you can go back even further. You know, the original kind of interpretation of Magneto as a just straight up mutant supremacist that just wanted to kill humans and mutants to take over the world from way back in the Stan and Jack days on X-Men. I feel like that's not really the real Magneto. The real Magneto is the one that Claremont built for 15, 17 years. But it's about keeping your moral and ethical compass pointing to true north while you're doing it, even while the world is trying to knock you off that path, even whenever your enemies might be actually a little more effective than you. It's an empty and hollow end state if you have to entirely violate all of your principles in order to get there. And that's the problem with Magneto. That's why he's not right. That's why he's never been right. He doesn't have that moral compass. It's kind of spins. He has no problem engaging in the necessary evil to get to that end state. Since comic books, especially superheroes, are, you know, American mythology morality tales, showing somebody that's willing to take the hard way if the easy way or the more direct path means sacrificing your principles to get there, it's not a desirable way to get there.
And then the article goes on to talk about some of the examples where Magneto really steps over the line. They mentioned in 1993's Fatal Attraction crossover event is the sum of all of Magneto's failings as a socio-political leader. In Uncanny X-Men 304, Magneto proclaims that any person who stands against him is his enemy. He eviscerates the acolyte Senyaka by crushing him with his own metal coils, the same acolyte who Magneto praised for killing innocent humans. At X-Men 25, Magneto ripped through the Earth's electromagnetic field, sending forth an EMP so powerful that it disabled all electronic devices across the globe. Countless planes full of innocent people fell from the sky. Countless hospitals lost all power, filled with the sick and dying newborns that needed intensive care. Pacemakers ceased functioning, killing an untold number of innocents. The total number of deaths that Magneto's single action caused is almost incalculable. What people really remember from that is when he rips the adamantium skeleton out of Wolverine, but the totality of what he was doing in that event is so much worse.
This is the law of unintended consequences for Magneto, and the fact that he, the people that believe that Magneto was right never even contemplate it. Everybody that's reading the comics can understand the frustration that he might be feeling. And the whole point was, you kind of sacrifice your morality once you start throwing innocent people into the middle of whatever your fight is. And that's what he did. Whether he intended to do it or not is kind of irrelevant. He did it. He did not consider, in his impetuous temper tantrum throwing behavior, what the consequences were to the people that weren't even involved in the fight.
Well, also in the same event, when Senyaka is killing innocent people, he justifies all of it. He's like, these are cattle. We don't get upset when we kill the cattle that are standing in our way, saying basically that humans are just animals, they're not even people. And he justified all that murder. He said it didn't matter.
Because the alternative is to start questioning oneself. If he were to stop and actually think about, holy shit, what the fuck did we just do? He'd probably realize the error of his ways and start going the Xavier route. He's not really portrayed as somebody that thinks too often backwards, but when he does, he almost always ends up regretting a lot of the actions he's taken.
They also mentioned in House of M #7 Enraged that his son Quicksilver had manipulated events to create a reality of his making. Magneto killed him by hurling pieces of metal at him until he was thoroughly crushed. Scarlet Witch managed to revive Quicksilver, but the deed had already been done. Magneto killed his son in an act of uncontrollable anger. More chilling still is the cool calmness that Magneto exuded when he killed an innocent mutant for no reason other than to quell her mutant powers. Once you start killing your kids because you're mad at them, because they are not going along with your plan, and obviously this resulted in the No More Mutants kind of proclamation that changed the history of X-Men forever and all that stuff. I mean, I think that pretty much thoroughly shows that you are an unrepentant, redeemable villain at that point. You killed your kid.
When you kill your children because you're angry at them for something that they did, you've crossed the line. You can't be right anymore. I feel like this is not really a questionable statement. I feel like this is pretty clear to anybody out there. He's shown himself to be very unrepentant, unable to change. I mean, the amount of blood on his hands, that no good person has that much blood on their hands.
In the end, he ended up becoming the things that he despised his entire adolescence. Obviously being in the concentration camps and seeing what his family went through. But then he put so many other families through the exact same thing, murdering their family members and stuff because they were different, all in the chase for that perfect society.
Yeah, he is what happens when you fight so hard against something that you despise, that you incidentally become that thing because you're no longer looking at them as human the same way that they were no longer looking at you as human. You turn your morality off because the goal becomes the only thing that you're focused on. The enemy becomes the enemy and not just somebody you're just disagreeing with. You cross lines that you never foresaw yourself crossing before because you get so swallowed up by whatever your crusade is. That's what happens whenever you have no ethical compass to guide you on your path.
The final thing they state, the need to cast off the yoke of oppression to fight for equal rights has always been a driving force in human society. To find so much solidarity in Magneto is a testament to his scope as a character. It still stands, however, that for all of his promises and radical actions, Magneto is nothing more than a mass murderer, a delusional man consumed by his ego-driven desire for power. There may be a day when he truly turns a new leaf and becomes the mutant savior he designs himself to be, but until then, Magneto is a villain whose actions have proven that he was never right. And once again, this is kind of why Krakoa falls apart, because Xavier, a true Xavier, you know, with his mind working, would never say, you know what, we're going to forgive Magneto of all his sins and we're just going to bring him into the fold, despite every insane thing this man has done, despite all the humans he's murdered, despite all the mutants that he's murdered, all for his own gain. He basically invited every villainous mutant in mutant history to Krakoa, and that's kind of where it all fell apart, because they forgot who were the good guys and who were the bad guys.
On its surface, I sort of understood the logic of, you know, hey, mutant immunity, blah, blah, blah. When you do that, when you invite somebody like that, when you invite all of the people like that, I mean, because Magneto is probably the most redeemable of most of them that he's brought to the island. He's still probably killed tens of thousands of people, if not millions of people in his life. Apocalypse, Omega Red, Mr. Sinister, the Dark Riders, all of them are just as big, if not bigger, murderers. And when you do that, when you invite them, when you give them, you know, a pardon and basically say, yeah, all is forgiven, you can hang out here with us, you're now taking those sins upon yourself. That was Krakoa's original sin.
I do want to say thank you very much to Doc. Now, obviously, there's a lot more Doc content. If you're unaware of this, if you go over to the Patreon, there's a link in the video description. We got an unfiltered portion of Doc every single week where we do a subject as well as a review, all unfiltered. We do a Q&A, 2 hours of all the questions that you ever wanted from Doc and myself. And we have an entire tier dedicated to you, Doc, because you're everyone's favorite guest for some reason.
I don't understand it either, but I will absolutely take it. It's always probably the highlight of my week to do the Patreon show. So come on over, visit us, and ask some questions.